Today we're carving a simple wolf out of a 1 by 1 inch piece of wood. And the length should be about 6 centimeters or 2.4 inches. We're going to divide this length into 3 parts. Then we're going to divide this edge into 5 parts. And now from this line over here, so 3/5 of the way from here, we're going to draw a curve to here on the lowest 1/3 of this edge. Then we can extend it to the other side and make a similar curve on the opposite face like that. Now we're going to remove this bit, and that can be done with sweeping cuts. If the piece of wood seems too short for holding on, this paring cut version of the sweeping cut works very well. Just remember to keep your thumb below this edge. Next, we're going to make sure that we have enough space for the tail. And for that, I'm going to divide this length into 2, and the bottom half I'm going to divide into 3 sections. And now this one on the bottom is what we're going to save. All of this we're going to take off. We're not going to need this much space this way. The tail is going to be slightly squished by the body, so we need just a little bit, I'd say about 1/4 of the way in, so like that. Now before we cut this part, I'm gonna leave a little bit of extra room over here for the knee, which is gonna be about at this mark. So here I'm drawing a small bump like this to have a little bit more room for the leg, like that. And now I'm gonna make 2 V-cuts, one over here right above the tail, just a small one like that, and then one over here right above the bump I just sketched. And I'm starting from the edges because these sharp edges are easier to remove, and then I can continue this V-cut to the middle. Like that. Next I'm gonna remove just a little bit of this unnecessary thickness of the leg, because we want the tail to be the furthest away point over here on the side. Like that. And then I'm taking off this bit. Like that. Now we're going to carve this knee on this side too, so just a similar kind of V-cut. Only this time it's not going to be as steep initially, since we don't have to remove quite as much wood. That's good enough for now. Next we're going to divide this bit into half, and the same on the other side. We can unite these 2 lines. This is where the ears are going to be. We want to leave enough room over here for all the details of the head. It's easy to move these slightly further up later on if necessary. Now I'm just making a few stop cuts to reveal just a little bit of these ears over here, even from the back. I'm taking a little bit of this wood away. And then we can make this back curve with a few sweeping cuts. Now on the front here, so this is the back, this is the front. We're gonna make a line that's about half of the thickness of the tail, maybe slightly more, so that then we have room to work with later on. These are going to be the paws. But before we carve this line, we can slim these edges down a bit, like this. We're going to leave just enough space so that the front limbs look like they make sense, that they're wide enough that when they're kept together, they don't look too blocky. And then we're going to make this V-cut. Now be very careful here not to chip off the paws. I made a small mistake and had to take the paws just a little bit back. Something like this works very well for now. And then we're going to make a few sweeping cuts. We're leaving a bump over here in the middle about this size. So just an outside curve. And then there's going to be an inside curve that goes over here to the paws, like that. And then another inside curve over here above this bump in the middle. So this area is an outside curve in the middle, and then we make another inside curve, just something like that. Now this is a slightly tricky place to cut due to the grain of the wood, so you're gonna have to cut from both sides in order to not chip the wood off entirely. It's not gonna be the prettiest cut right away, but it doesn't have to be. We're gonna change this quite significantly still. Something like that is good enough for now. So now we have an inside curve, an outside curve, and an inside curve. Then we can take off this corner by making this top of the head part be parallel to this direction of the back. That's good. Next we can make everything a little bit rounder. So we're not going to need any of these sharp edges. And at the same time we can also make this head a little bit more pointy. Something like this. So the bottom can be pretty round, except for the paws over here. Those are going to be basically a straight line for now. Next we're going to make the separation between the hind limbs and the front limbs. And it's going to be something like this. Over here on the side of the tail, it's just this curve, because the paw of this limb is going to be hidden behind the tail. On the other side, it's a similar curve, and then there's the paw, like that. We can start over here on this side. So it's just a stop cut with two sides. So we have this side of the leg and then this side of the tail over here. And then it's a similar thing on this side, except that there's a lot more corners. There's a few ways to do this, but I think sometimes it makes sense to use the tip of the blade, like this. And sometimes it makes sense to start with V-cuts, like over here, and then transition them into stop cuts. Something like this is good enough for now. Then we can create a couple inside corners, or on this side it's actually just about reinforcing this inside corner. On the other side we're creating a new corner. So we want the knees to be pointing slightly outward, and that means removing wood from here, and then over here it means making this V-cut. And again, we need to be very careful so that we don't split this paw off entirely. And then on this side, this paw also needs to be turning outward. So that means removing wood from here so that it connects to the rest of the leg nicely, like that. Then we can separate these two front limbs from each other. We're just making a Y shape like this. And that can be made with these V cuts with the tip of the blade. And over here we need to also cut from this side to cut off the chips at the end of the cut. Like that, and then like that. And now the legs still look very blocky. So I'm reinforcing this curvature that we made before. Then we can separate the paws from each other, which is regular V-cuts like these. And another similar V-cut over here on the side can be used to separate the tail from this left paw. Now is a good time to work on the head shape a little bit. So we want to create something like this. That's for the mouth. So we need to make some V-cuts. And I think it makes sense to do this now because everything is still blocky and pretty strong. So it's less likely that this cut will break anything. But we still gotta be very careful. So I'm just making small cuts and going further bit by bit instead of making a huge cut at first, because that might just split the entire thing. That's good enough for now. That gives us a basic idea of the mouth. Maybe this can be taken down just a little bit like that. And then we need to make this part pointy and a lot slimmer. So we can just make sweeping cuts from the sides, slimming down the snout and also the jaw. So we're looking for this triangular shape. We can also slim down the neck. And then we can define the shape of the ears a little further by turning this angle a bit more upward like that. So we want the ears to be pretty pointy too. And while continuing to make this nose pointy, we can make a few of these tighter sweeping cuts to make this distinction between the top of the head and the muzzle. Then we can refine the shape of the mouth a little bit. At this point it really helps to look at some reference images. We can also make the shape of the jaw a lot better from down here by creating this V shape. And then over here we can make a few stop cuts to separate the head from the neck a little bit. We can also refine the shape of the ears by making a few sweeping cuts over here on the corners. And then we can separate the ears from each other with a few sweeping cuts. And then we can highlight that distinction by creating this inside corner between the ears and the head. This area is one of the most important parts in making a wolf look like a wolf. There should be a decent bit of curvature on this side of the snout too. If it's just a straight line like this, then it's gonna look weird. So with very, very small cuts, you can make this shape rounder so that it's just pointy from all around. And then the nose can be a little bit flat like that. And while you make these adjustments, the lower jaw is gonna need some adjustments too. Make sure it's the right thickness and the right length. And again, this is where reference images help tremendously. Next, we're gonna make this part of the tail. So we can start by separating the tail from this right hind limb with this V-cut. And then we make some more V-cuts, and the goal is to try to get this kind of a slightly curved shape. Now we have all of the major features of the wolf, and it's just time to refine some of the shapes and proportions. So these front limbs are still very blocky and thick. The entire figure is a little bit square, so I'm gonna make the shape a little bit smoother, a little bit slimmer. These details on the neck of how the fur goes when it starts from this Y shape and goes all the way over here to the edge of the jaw are a very nice detail that, in my opinion, makes the wolf look a lot more like a wolf. This is something that you can kind of freestyle with. You can look through photos of wolves and decide what kind of shapes you want to make. But in general, something like this, where there's a little bit of wrinkles and they go down over here, looks pretty decent in my opinion. This leg will also look better if you turn this V-cut to be slightly downward like that.